Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you are watching this. Again, this is Dave Nagel. I really apologize to the folks on the team from South Dakota that I didn't get this information to you sooner. I just had a couple of glitches in trying to get these webinars accomplished. So maybe you had a chance to see the first one, which was a review. This one will be of days 1 and 2. This one will be a little bit shorter. I just want to highlight just a couple places in using the CFA 2.0 template. What's nice about this, it will help you going into Monday or Tuesday, or if you don't touch it until then, it certainly can help you along the way. And I'm going to guide us through how that template can be empowering, not just for yourself, but as we share our assessments with others, but especially within a district. It's critical that we know how others are using templates and formatting to allow other adults and teachers to be able to understand how processes were used. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with an overarching concept and thought that I've mentioned every time and will continue to. Any one of our assessments that we create really comes down to the 3 points of purpose, evidence, inference. And the more we think about that, I think it will drive a lot of the questions that will come up in terms of how many items to write, how much information to gather, what's my purpose, which in our situation comes back to the unwrapping, and then when will I have enough evidence to make a quality inference to be able to make an instructional adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and use Kathleen's version of her template so far, and I really appreciate, not that she really gave me permission, I just kind of jumped into hers, but that hers was completed at a level I think would be really nice for us to guide. So pretty straightforward. What is our unit name, teacher? Now the time frame and the bridge, that's where I'm really going to encourage us. We can ballpark 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever we think. But the bridge is something that we determine during the unit. We're going to talk a lot about that on day 3, about when we determine the date and point when we should monitor how much reteaching time might we need. And that will determine on a lot of factors how well the students are progressing through the priority standards and whether or not it's a conceptual or procedural level of understanding that we're going to come back to in the subsequent units. She had one particular priority standard for this unit, and like we've said, we want to list the standard number and write out the full and exact verbiage of the standard. Just like matter, we're not going to create it or destroy it or change it. And then here's what it kind of looks like with her supporting standards. So just a similar one that I used from Christy to get an idea how some folks had it on their screen. And either way, what the unit name isn't as important, but we're going to go ahead and not list the bridge time yet. I'm going to go back to Kathleen's. Here were her supporting standards, and she had several. She also went ahead and listed the connection to the mathematical standards of practice, which I think is a great intentionality, that we're going to model with math and reason abstractly and quantitatively. As I mentioned during the last webinar, one of our standards we might hit in certain units is to attend to precision. Other times we might not need to attend to precision. So listing those mathematical standards of practice is a great example of not just trying to throw it into our assessment, but to be intentional to show where we are aligning that piece of leverage from one course, one subject matter to another. So excellent job, an excellent example that we can all learn from. I'm going to kind of highlight now her unwrapping. And again, she had one particular standard to develop a model to describe the movement of matter and energy among producers, consumers, decomposers, and the environment. Notice what she did here, though. On the left-hand side, she listed just the concepts, but she went ahead and listed twice, which is fine, because technically the students are going to have to develop a model to describe the movement of matter among producers, consumers, decomposers, and environment, and do the same thing with energy. So while it might seem a little bit cumbersome to do it twice, I really compliment her on intentionally doing that, because now she's got a roadmap for what she's got to make sure her students can know and be able to do. And some will be able to maybe describe the movement of matter, but not energy. Or maybe they can handle matter with producers and consumers and energy with decomposers in the environment. And it will allow her sort of a check and balance as she builds her assessment to go back to and make sure that there's enough evidence throughout the unit and in the post-assessment that students have been able to do both. And then she was intentional on the right-hand side to say, pretty much we're looking at a level 3 of DOK, but then listed what the Bloom's taxonomy was next to it. So excellent job, but more intentionally at that point where at times certain standards might call for this, to where it might seem like we're doing something twice. We're not adding anything in. We're just being very intentional with that. So again, really compliment her for how she kind of took the time to do that here. Listed her central questions with the big ideas. And again, we talked in the last webinar, big ideas might be very short and concise, and other times they're a little bit longer in a full sentence, but they should match and align with our essential question. So we can start here, even though we built the big idea first, with checking for an alignment with the essential question. How does matter move between organisms and get exchanged from and back into the environment? The movement of matter through ecosystems creates changes in different organisms in the environment. Students will need to elaborate more on that, but at least that's getting us into the conceptual understanding. Same thing for the next one. How does energy, I actually did a cut and paste. I cut off the word move through an ecosystem, or flow. It flows through many ways through living and decomposing organisms. Students are going to have to demonstrate that, show that, model that. But again, that's the conceptual takeaway that they will have, hopefully through the end of this unit. Now, one thing that you'll see on the template, and what I purposely put intentionally completed on days 3 and 4. Now, obviously, once you get in the hang of it and you're developing your own assessments, you don't have to wait for days 3 and 4. But when we get to the learning targets and success criteria, what you see here, direct cut and paste from your graphic organizer. There will be times when it seems like it's a cut and paste, and it is, because we're going to be learning the steps one at a time. So the essential questions will be supplanted right there just from above. Same thing will happen when we get into our learning progressions and quick progress checks. There will be some cutting and pasting because we're doing one step at a time, as opposed to having one graphic organizer that would continue to go to the right and have many different places on. So that's why that's the case. But again, it's not to be cumbersome for cumbersome sake. It's as we're learning the process, we got to do our essential questions first. Then those essential questions should, when we come back on days 3 and 4, align to the learning target, align to the success criteria, determine some of the essential vocabulary. And as I mentioned a moment ago, you'll see several things that we will get into on days 3 and 4. The other part of the template that I wanted to draw attention to, and only a few folks had jumped into this, but where we see that summary of items linked to unwrapped concepts and skills. There's two schools of thought. The first one is this is a great check and balance for any teacher for their own use and then when others are looking at it. So what you'll do is you will place within that part of the template all the aspects of your unwrapping one at a time. So this is a language arts example where the teacher, one of their points was support analysis of inferences made from a text, listed at a DOK 3, and there she listed all of the items completely filled out that address that part of the unwrapping. So she could have just listed item number 3 and constructed item number 12, but then someone has to go search for them. So I'm really going to encourage us to take the time for the selected item to just do a cut and paste right from there, or the constructed response. Go ahead and cut out the item. You don't have to write out the rubric, but it will allow somebody to go first. Do we see an alignment between the selected and constructed response to that part of the unwrapping? And then, is that enough? When we say those 2 items, 3 items, however many there are, is that enough evidence to address that? Or at times, might there be more than we need? Where if we see 5 selected response and 2 constructed, and we say, might be able to shorten that up and have a shorter assessment that provides just as much evidence. So again, it might seem like it's an extra step, but it's really not. And what it does is it empowers you as the teacher to review it when you come back to it next year. It certainly empowers others as they're looking at your assessment to give you feedback and understand where your thought rationale was in terms of how you designed your items to link back to the unwrapping. Then the last part that I want to just address now for the template is the selected response items and the distractor analysis. This is where we will write out our items. Now, we will have to cut and paste them eventually back into the student version that we will give them, because the students won't get this version. They won't be getting this part of the assessment with the link to the unwrapping. Not that we can't put the unwrapping next to their items. So here, when we do the distractor analysis, and we'll walk us through a couple examples, the left-hand column is where you would put select a response item. Right-hand column, what were the inferences and for the correct or incorrect responses? Several ways we can do this. Here's a science example from a teacher that used a Punnett square. According to the Punnett above, what percentage of the offspring will have a double chin or a normal chin based on the genotypes above? See choices A, B, C, and D. Then on the right-hand side, you see what the teacher thought potentially were some of the inferences for A, C, and D, with B being the correct answer. So this is a place for us to list those inferences, and not only for ourselves to double check, but for peers to monitor and take a look at what our inferences possibly were. There's another one from that same teacher. So, and by the way, if I go through any of these fast, I'm certainly going to send the slides so you have them, and all these examples are in the Google Drive. How is it possible for Zelda to have blue eyes? You see the choices, and again, we might give this teacher some feedback on the distractors. There's no doubt about it. But then on the right-hand side, you see the inferences into the student learning around choices A, B, and D. So correct choice is C. If you need to pause the recording at all during any of this time, please feel free to do so. I'm going to go ahead and move on. But I know this is one you might want to read through because there's a lot of verbiage in this particular item. Now, here's another example from a language arts one. Cite evidence to support the claim. Which of the following is the strongest piece of evidence to support that Mrs. Mallard considers the death of Brentley a blessing? You see A, B, C, and D. And then you see that D is the correct answer. So what they did is they just moved it all over into the right-hand column. That's fine as well. There's the selection, there's the inference. I really liked how this teacher made a point. Students were focusing on the word grief, missing some comprehension. The next one, they didn't analyze the evidence correctly to support their claim. They might have misunderstood wept, because even though she wept in this particular story, she wasn't weeping because she was sad necessarily. So again, the key is that we're listing those inferences. How it gets formatted here, certainly there's some leeway there and whatever might make sense, but we want to be intentional with listing those inferences here. Here's another example from a language arts teacher that I worked with that I just felt was another way to kind of show the highlighting. Again, if you need to pause this at this time, please feel free to do so. I'll share all these examples, but I wanted folks to kind of see how we use this part of the template. The downside is it's an extra step when we build the student version. The upside is it makes the teacher version so much more friendly for the teacher who's using it and to review it next year, and also for peers who are reviewing that assessment when you're not there with them. When you're not looking and being able to describe and add detail verbally, we just have to have that piece of paper, as I mentioned, almost like we're on a desert island, and get as much as we can so that formatting really comes into play. Hope this was useful, and certainly hopeful it's something that we're going to obviously spend time on together. I don't want the template or the formatting to get in the way of the process, but it's something that I think will definitely help and augment the success of all the work at any individual school site or teacher classroom, or on a larger scale with what we're trying to accomplish across the state. But if you have other questions, as always, not just on Monday and Tuesday, but every time we're together, please feel free to shoot me an email. Have a safe trip into Pierre, and I look forward to seeing everybody Monday morning.